Hello one and all, and welcome back to the RimWorld Eternal Winter series, the coldest place in the entire galaxy, some might say. You know what? Actually, I would say that too. At the moment, my dear friends, we are still currently recovering from the raid at the end of last episode, if you recall, where a powerful sorcerer beat the living hell out of us. As we're all resting up though from our injuries, I've decided to do a little bit of trading with a trade caravan that's in the territory. We didn't end up selling too much to them, but we did end up buying a polar bear from them. There are many reasons as to why I decided to buy this massive carnivore, one of which of course being defense, but the main reason also being because I wanted to. Now that we have this beautiful animal though, I leave it up to you guys to leave some names in the comment section down below for it. Speaking of defenses, one of the first items on our docket today is going to be to go and reset our traps, as well as moving all the items out of the entranceway that were dropped in the raid last episode. You guys probably remember last episode as well. I couldn't really come to terms with what I wanted to call our base here. I kept calling it different things, but we got a great comment by our good friend Concerned Thanos 6725 who said that we could call it a keep, and I really like that term for the base. One, because it is very accurate and sounds really cool, and also because it reminds me of our Ye Olde Knights series that I did over a year ago, where we also called that medieval base a keep as well, so it's a bit of a throwback. As I mentioned earlier, we do have quite a few elven weapons that were dropped during the raid, many of them swords and axes, so we decided that we would actually have our keep members go ahead and equip those. Not only were these elven weapons in much better condition than our current melee weapons, and of course a much higher standard, they were actually much stronger as well in terms of their damage output. So as you could imagine, we definitely wanted to use those opposed to the other weapons we had. Sometime after this, we would spend a great deal of time working on extending our warehouse/production room, and it went pretty well. We had even managed to find a vein of salt ore, which can actually be used in many different meat preservation methods. During this time as well, we actually received a notification that the Royal Tribute Collector had arrived. The Royal Tribute Collector is actually a collector that comes from the Imperial government of this planet, so essentially the governing body. This was our first encounter with them as far as I could remember. You know, normally in my series, I'll go to war with the Empire, we'll destroy them, we'll take over the Empire and use them as a puppet, but I think in this series in particular, I would like to grow along with the Empire, two great empires basically governing this planet. Unfortunately though, even though I would like to get into the good graces of the Imperials, I didn't have anything to provide to the tribute collectors, so we'll have to come up with some other ways of gaining their favor. In the meantime though, we are going to continue our extensive work on our warehouse and production workshop. We're actually building some new shelves, moving some production benches around, and we're also building a designated area for our timber. Of course, after doing so, we would try to build as many tiles as possible, but it looks like we need to cut some more stone. We would then finish up smoothing the walls to make sure it's all beautiful. We also ended up building a proper stone cutting bench, and we would actually put it next to our stone cutting spot as well. We would immediately begin having Rosh and Irene cutting up plenty of stone chunks into stone blocks. As I mentioned earlier, we needed some more to finish up the flooring here in the workshop, but just as well, we actually planned on building a few more castle walls. And as one might imagine, we're going to need plenty of stone to go about doing so. Immediately after I felt that we had an appropriate amount of stone acquired, I decided to go ahead and replace our eastern entrance into the base with a new stone tower. You'll notice in this current design, I do still have the tower functioning as an entrance, although I do end up changing that later and putting embrasures in so that we can simply shoot out of it instead of walking in and out. I would also take some time to improve upon other towers by building flooring, and then I would also smooth some walls in the hallways between the buildings. Now, smoothing the walls, of course, is simply for beauty, but building the flooring in the towers is not only for beauty. That is actually because the snow that is in those towers, it's just so cold it will not melt, and it actually makes us have a slower movement speed. So by building flooring, getting rid of the snow, we can actually move appropriately. It was during this time as well that we were improving upon our towers and the hallways that we actually had a wild snow hare self-tame. game. Unfortunately, we basically immediately slaughtered it for food. We're pretty keen on having pets, but we did just get a polar bear that's hard to feed already. But we were grateful for this handsome little snow hare. I'm sure he'll be great steaks. Although the snow hare is quite small, he may only make one steak. Maybe something of a bunny nugget or something of that sort, of course. I do want to try to get animals at some point, maybe even do something of a small indoor farm or even an outdoor farm, of course, within the mountains here where they can go into the warm area and eat and rest. But at this time, I just don't feel that we have a significant food production or anything like that to actually try and feed those animals. Sometime later, though, it apparently was Lim's birthday. Now, Lim here, who has a longer name, but I'm pronouncing it as Lim because I'm horrible with words, actually ended up developing hearing loss, unfortunately, due to her new age. Unfortunately, with our medieval technology, there's no way for us to correct hearing loss, so this is going to be the case until she eventually dies, of course, which is a shame because this does, of course, decrease her hearing by half. It's only going to get worse, and that also decreases her manipulation. There was some good that came from the event, though. It made me realize I had not set up in our Days Matter mod tab to actually have the colonists celebrate birthdays and other events, which would give them some significant mood boosts, so I went ahead and did that. If we end up feeling like it's a bit overpowered, or that they're just constantly partying instead of working, we can always turn those off. Sometime later, we would begin smelting a holy shit ton of iron ore, which is the primary ore, the metallic ore that we actually have. Now, this is from a good comment by our friend AlexZZ16, who was saying that we should actually build some of the Napoleonic era armor, and I think that's a good idea, although I would have to go through researching it, and we do currently already have some armors from the More Medieval Helms and Armors mod unlocked. So because of that, for the time being at least, we are going to be going with those types of armors and sets from that mod. Specifically to begin with, we ended up going with a light plate armor made of iron, of course. Now, this light plate armor is basically, in at least to my knowledge, a starter type armor, so it doesn't exactly have perfect protection and whatnot, but it is much better than nothing at all, which is what we currently had. Now, because we're trying to train our polar bear and just feed it in general, our food storage area is looking a little thinned out, so we've decided to go about hunting some of the worst predators here, the Arctic coyotes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Arctic wolves, polar bears, and other types of predators are obviously much worse than these Arctic coyotes, and I do agree with you, but these little boogers are definitely very dangerous. If you remember in the first few episodes, an Arctic coyote is what actually took Rasha's leg. So as you could imagine, we weren't too hesitant on taking down their population just a teeny tiny bit and turning them into some stew. It was really something of a win-win situation. Less predators in our territory, and we would also be able to feed ourselves and our polar bear. But because of our increasing population and just how cold it is here, hunting is not exactly as reliable as it used to be in terms of food production, so we've actually decided to swap out the fiber corn for some onions, at least for the time being. For a hot moment there, I wasn't exactly paying attention, but when I finally realized, it looked like Zippy and Rosh were actually getting married and everyone was gathering in our little dining hall to celebrate. It was quite the beautiful occasion, and by the end of it, they were man and wife. I mean, I suppose they might as well. There's no better time, seeing how Zippy is currently in her 3rd trimester with her pregnancy. Ah, and would you look at that. Speak of the devil, Zippy is now in labor, which is a very scary thing for me. I'm always afraid when my colonists begin having their children. Unfortunately, it did seem that the labor would be very long, intense, and quite painful, of course, but thankfully we had the best doctor in the, well, keep, Lim here, as well as the father, Rosh. And with her love by her side, as well as the good doctor, nothing could go wrong, and thankfully, once the baby was born, it was actually quite healthy. It was a beautiful baby girl by the name of Cain. I'm not really sure where that name came from. I assume Rosh and Zippy decided to name the baby girl that on their own, but little did they know I had quite the nickname in store for it. I decided to give the baby the nickname of Snowdrop, while keeping Cain as the baby's actual name. Now, this nickname actually came from one of our Discord members who said that the Snowdrop is a flower that, while looking very delicate, can survive the harshest of winter, which is why I just think that this name is spectacular, especially for the heir to Rosh's dynasty. dynasty. Of course, before anything like inheriting this entire dynasty comes about, we do need to continue building up the dynasty, and Snowdrop needs to begin growing. We ended up building her a very small room just off of Rosh and Zippy's room, and we also built her a bone toy box, a bone toy thing, and a bone bookshelf for her education. And you know, even though she's an infant, she seemed quite pleased with it all. Just after finishing up Snowdrop's room though, we had our very first harvest of our onions, which was amazing. These onions will help supply us with food for months to come, and we would continue growing a few more of them, of course. Because even though this amount of onions was really great and whatnot, if we continue increasing our population here as steadily as we have been, we're going to have to continue growing more and more onions, and most likely increasing the size of our farm. But now to expand our keep, we decided to take on quite a large project. Unfortunately, not too many of our pawns are all that great at mining, so digging through all this stone and whatnot to build a new room, several new rooms actually, took quite a while. So obviously, as you can imagine, this portion of the keep was going to be quite delayed, but unfortunately it was actually going to be even more delayed as we now had a man-hunting pack of Yeti that entered the area. If you remember a few episodes ago, we had saw a Yeti hunting in the area before. Well, this time it would appear that there is a pack and they are specifically hunting us, but I bring that up because it seems that Yeti are becoming more and more common, as are other fantasy creatures and sorcerers and things of that nature. Obviously, we would begin firing at them from the comfort of our towers with our embrasures. As they were getting closer, we continued firing upon them, some of them hitting traps and things like that. Eventually, we killed 2 of them, but there was a third, however, that was getting away and then coming back, and eventually, though, we ended up killing it as well after it got done playing chicken with us. Ah, these poor, dumb, massive creatures. At some point, I do think I would like to try and tame one, but for now, we'll settle for cutting their throats. But now with the 3 filthy Yetis slain, we would finally be able to begin working on this section of our keep again, taking a long amount of time to try and mine out every bit of the stone and whatnot that we could. Now, what I had planned on doing with this section of the keep here is actually building 2 small prison rooms. We could always use them as something else for the time being if we like, but I am trying to build 2 small cells essentially, and then I'm also going to do a recreation room where the guards of this small prison would be hanging out and whatnot, but of course everyone in the keep can use it as well. Currently, in terms of recreational items, the only thing that we have is the dice and cup game. There are some other forms of recreation that I'm going to try to seek the resources out to build, but for the time being, we're going to use the stone we've acquired thus far to try and beautify the floors and whatnot, as well as smooth the walls. We really wanted to look nice here. We also ended up using a good bit of granite to try and build ourselves a wood furnace to keep this section of the keep nice and warm, though I did want to try and share the heat between the main base and this section, so we actually ended up building an embrasure in one of the walls. This will actually allow us to share these rooms as one, unfortunately, but they do share heat together, which is the important part. Not only will this embrasure allow heat to travel between the 2 rooms, but because this is where we'll be hosting our prisoners, it will also be useful for any guards to run behind and begin firing in case we have a prison break, minimizing any damage that the prisoners can do to the keep and us as well. At one point though, I did spot Lim playing with young baby Snowdrop, and I just thought it was like the sweetest thing in the world. Good old Auntie Lim playing with the baby. It's just, I like seeing these characters who are not actually blood-related family, but they are indeed family. Really reminds me of Uncle Reek from our Alcohol Empire series, for those of you that remember. I only hope that Lim does not suffer the same fate as Uncle Reek, however. Once again, some time later, we ended up having a great big yield of onions from our harvest, but this time around, instead of planting onions back, we would actually end up planting some cotton plants so that we can try and get some cloth. And thanks to the medieval overhaul mod, getting cloth isn't as simple as simply harvesting the cotton. No, we're actually going to need a specific production bench to make cloth. The production bench in question, I believe, is a loom or a spindle or something of that sort. I kind of forgot what the name was, and I'm too lazy to check again, but we eventually built one pretty quickly, and we were preparing for a harvest of cotton. But as we began waiting on our cotton plants to grow, I decided that we would begin making some significant improvements to the keep as a whole, starting with our dining hall. I decided to replace the old chairs and table that were in there in favor of some proper dining chairs, as well as a reinforced table, which I think just looks so much better better, and so do the colonists. Unfortunately though, as we were making significant improvements to our dining room, tragedy struck our new crop. Unfortunately, our cotton plants had a massive blight, all except a handful of them. I forced Raj to try and harvest those 3 or 4 that were okay as fast as possible before they became blighted, and then unfortunately we would have to cut the remaining ones and begin regrowing them. Thankfully though, from the few plants that we had managed to salvage, we did get some cotton from them, and we managed to spin that into about 30 or so cloth, which unfortunately isn't really much. We can't really do anything with that, but it is a small start to a much larger pile, hopefully. We yet again had the Imperial Tribute collectors stop by, and once again of course we had nothing to give them, but they did end up leaving us a gift, which I thought was pretty nice. It wasn't anything too special, it just turned out to be a pretty nice looking top hat, which Irene decided to take for herself, but this really got me thinking we should get Irene and a few of the others some type of helmet. Of course, there's no one better here in the keep to make said helmet than Irene herself, so you could consider it something of a testing of her very own prototype, I suppose. As I had mentioned earlier, the most abundant metallic resource that we still currently have is iron, so of course this helmet would be made of iron. The reason I keep bringing that up is because iron helmets are actually much weaker than steel or plasteel helmets, and of course that's worth noting, simply so that you understand the stats on this helmet are going to be lower because it's made of iron than if it were made of other resources, of course. So it's just something to keep in mind. If we were to get our hands on steel or plasteel abundantly where we could make armor, it would obviously be much better. While we're on the topic of armors, as I mentioned earlier in the video, there are other types of armors from different mods that we actually have listed here. So I've decided that we would build a brand new research table, one that has a higher work speed, so that we can begin researching these new technologies in armor and different types of protective clothing and things like that. To begin with, of course, we're starting with the medieval overhaul research trees, and then we'll make our way towards the Napoleonic and what other branches we have. Unfortunately, at this time, though, we have yet another raid, once again from the Grave River Pact. It would seem that they just never give up. We have quite a large group of elves coming to a southern part of our territory, and it looks like they're planning before they attack. Of course, once again, this group of elves also has quite the interesting characters, one of which appears to be a very powerful bright mage sorceress. But other than her magical gifts, she was pretty standard. Also, along with the other elves, was one that appeared to be carrying some type of blunderbuss, so basically a flintlock shotgun, which I thought was quite strange for the elves. Regardless of who they were and what they were carrying, they were here to kill us. So we started firing our mortar at them. We missed with the first shot, so of course we ended up taking a second shot, and unfortunately we missed with that one as well, and now we're out of mortar rounds. As day began to break, the elves began assaulting our keep, so of course we ran to one of our southern towers and began firing at them from the safety of our embrasures, although they weren't extremely safe as we began taking a few arrows as well. As the elves continued moving towards the entrance of our base, so did we to the other tower where we would begin firing on them, and I made something of an oopsie daisy. I forgot that the bright mage was carrying fire bombs, and she immediately began throwing them at us, catching us on fire, and that was a little bit of an issue, as you could imagine. Thankfully though, she hit a trap as she was moving around, and once she fell, the others began to flee in a panicked state, and this was great because we didn't have to kill any more of them or risk getting blown up by fire bombs. Something else that was great, of course, she didn't die to the trap. She was only extremely injured, which meant that we could capture her, take her to our brand new prison cells, and begin enslaving her. I would recruit her, but unfortunately she appears to be unwaveringly loyal to her faction, so a friend by force will have to suffice. After capturing her, we would also then begin putting out the fire in our tower, and I was afraid our pawns here were going to die from like a superheating on the inside of the tower, but I realized that the embrasures allow the cold air in, so it's basically considered outside, thus no giant fireball killing them. But of course, I want to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I love you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed the longer episode today. I'm hoping to try and make all of our episodes fairly long, over 20 minutes for sure, if I can. There's a recent poll on the channel, if you haven't seen it already. It's in the community tab, where I basically asked you guys what length of episodes you guys would like. Right now, the majority looks to be leaning to about 30 minutes or more. You know, I'm guessing it's probably going to stay that way, so I'd like to try and kind of begin going towards those numbers, that length of time for videos. The only issue with it really is I just think I'm kind of crunched on time most of the time when I'm making videos and stuff, and that's normally why they're less than 15 minutes. I'm definitely going to try and strive to do over 20 minutes per video. Obviously, of course, though, I don't want to try and pad out the runtime of each episode or any of my videos with just filler or any shit like that that's, you know, not even really got a purpose, unless it's some interesting specific detail that I feel just kind of fills out the lore of the world or anything like that, which kind of brings me to my next question to see if you guys would like something like this. At the end of each episode of the Eternal Winter series, I'm thinking having you guys maybe kind of comment about the lore of the world, the characters, weapons, basically the lore of anything that you're seeing throughout these videos in this universe that we're playing in. That you guys would like to specify a little bit more on, that we could talk about at the end of the videos and just kind of do a little bit of a dive into those. That would really, I think, flesh out the length of the videos, of course, but also just the world building and stuff, that, you know, the lore of this world that we're playing in, and, you know, things like that. Of course, I always love trying to incorporate your guys' ideas and, you know, story narratives and things like that into the videos and into the colonies and just the series in general and stuff like that. So I also think it's a really good way that we can try and do that as well. So be sure to let me know what you guys think about doing that at the end of each video in the comment section down below. And of course, if you guys have any lore or anything you'd like to add to the comment section on this video, be sure to do so and we'll give it a shot at the end of next episode, as I mentioned there. But once again, thank you guys ever so much for watching today's episode. I really do truly hope you've enjoyed. I love you ever so much, and I will catch you next time. Goodbye.